Hey everybody, today we're going to be looking at graphing sine and cosine using transformations, specifically off the amplitude, the period, and what we call the midline. So we're going to take what we did last time, where we found the parent function of sine and cosine. So remember from last time, the parent function for sine looks something like this, and the parent function for cosine looks something like this. Now remember, these don't necessarily stop right here, right? They keep going forever and ever. But this is what we call one period. Okay, and that's going to be used today. Basically where it starts repeating. Okay, now the big difference, of course, between sine and cosine is sine starts in this middle area at 0, and cosine starts at 1. Okay, so that's the big difference between these two. And honestly, it's really one of the only differences. Okay, so let's look at that and how we graph these. So again, the graphing part here isn't too bad. If you have 3 colors, go ahead and grab those. I'm going to be using red, blue, and purple. But you do you. If you need to pause the video, go ahead and do that now. What you want to do, so any number that's being like added or subtracted, usually on the end, that's what's going to be our red. Okay, that's going to be our midline. The number out front is going to be our amplitude. And then the number in the middle is going to give us the period, but it is not the period. And I'll explain that in a second. Okay, so the amplitude or the midline and amplitude are pretty straightforward. Move this camera just a little bit. It's not the way. Midline and amplitude straightforward. Okay, so -1, I'm going to go down to -1. There it is, done. Okay, and again, like today, like of the 3 or 4 graphing units we do, honestly, trig is actually probably one of the easier ones. Okay, so I'm just going to draw that line there. Okay, for amplitude. Amplitude is 2. So what amplitude means is how far up and down from the midline. Okay, now it is important that you go from the midline, okay, not the x-axis, unless they are the same thing. Okay, always from the midline. So I'm going to count up by 2. So 1, 2. I'm going to put a solid line up here. I'm going to count down by 2. 1, 2. And I'm down here. Okay, so midline, and then I count up from the midline. I don't count up from the x-axis. It's not going to be up here. It's going to be from the midline, always from the midline. Okay, the hardest part of this is the period. So we're going to do 2 pi over b. Okay, so remember from the Desmos activity I had you guys do, b was that number that was inside with their variable, either x or theta. Okay, so I'm just going to say 2 pi. I'm going to take that number there, put it in for b, and that's going to turn into just pi. What the period is, again, is where it starts repeating. So this number actually here is what we call the frequency. And the frequency is the number of times that it would normally happen over 2 pi. So normally for sine, it starts repeating at 2 pi. Here, what this would say is that I would have 2 repeats during from 0 to 2 pi, okay? Which means that it's really repeating at 1 pi. So I'm going to put that over here. Okay, I'm going to put pi right here. Okay, now there's going to be slightly different expectations for honors and regulars here. Okay, for regulars, that's all I need. Okay, now you do want to go ahead and still chop it in half and half for regulars. For honors, I want you to actually label these. So this would be pi over 2. This would be pi over 4. And this would be 3 pi over 4. Okay, again, for regulars, you do not need to label those. Okay, and then in the virtual class as well. But for honors, I do want you labeling. Okay, I'm just trying to make one video here instead of 2. Okay, so at this point, we need to say, okay, is it sine or cosine? This one's sine. So remember, sine starts in the middle. Okay, and then it goes up, and then it goes down, and then it comes back to the middle again. So if I really kind of drew that on here, it's like my midline's right here for both. And my amplitude lines are up here and down here for both. Okay, so I would start at the midline, go up to the amplitude, come back down. This kind of looks like that halfway point that we put there a second ago. Go down, come back up. And then these peaks and valleys are the half of the half points. Okay, so that's where those are coming from and why we want to include those. So that being said, graphing this, I do want to start at the midline. We're starting at the midline because it's sine. We'll look at cosine in a minute. We're going to go up till we hit the top, and we want the top to line up pretty close to that first one. We want to come back down to the midline in the middle here. Okay, now again, we're going to the midline, not the x-axis. Everything is off the midline. Okay, and then we want to hit down here. And then we want to come back up. Okay, now keep in mind that this doesn't stop here, so we do want to kind of add arrows because it does repeat forever. But with the repeat, we just need one. If you're going into 1050, 1060, they do require 2 periods. Okay, but again, you'll get that when you get to 1050, 1060. Really, it's just repeating it one more time. And that's it. That's graphing sine and cosine. It's nothing really super fancy. That's basically all you have to do. Okay, so let's look at another one. So we got our midline, our amplitude, which is a -3 this time. Okay, we'll talk about that, what that negative means in a second. And then my period's coming from the 4. Okay, but remember the 4 is really the frequency, so I want to do 2 pi divided by 4, which is going to be pi over 2. Okay, throwing everything on a graph. And I purposefully did not include graphs on your worksheet because I want you to create your own here because it makes it a little easier. Okay, so I'm going to go up to 2 for that midline. Okay, and then the negative doesn't matter for the amplitude. That's still up by 3, down by 3. So from the midline, so 1, 2, 3, not from the x-axis, from the midline. So 3, and then 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then my end point is going to be at pi over 2. Cutting in half, cutting in half, cutting in half. Again, honors that are regulars, that's all I need. Honors, I need you to put in those pi over 4, pi over 8, and 3 pi over 8. Okay, again, for honors, yours would just look like this. Okay, now we do want to, it's still going to be sine, so we're still going to start in the middle, end in the middle. For the negative, what that did, if you remember from the Desmos activity, when you slid that A slider all the way to the left, it flipped it. Okay, so instead of going up first, we're just going to go down first. So I'm going to go down until I hit that spot, go back up. Again, we want to cross the midline, not the x-axis at that middle one. Hit the top, and then come back down to the midline. Okay, and remember, it doesn't stop there. It keeps going. And that's it. Again, these ones are pretty straightforward as to how to do them. The one thing that students always ask is how exact do I need to be on these? Okay, well, if you had your graph and you did like this, something like this, where it's kind of off a little bit, that's fine. Okay, I'm not going to take off for that. However, if your graph was something like this, then we've got an issue. Okay, so just do your best. Again, I'm not going to be super nitpicky, but I do want it to be accurate. If you did this, where you're crossing here instead of at the midline, yeah, I would take off a little bit for that, just because that is a conceptual error. It's a minor one, but it's a conceptual error. Okay, so again, try to keep it close. Make sure you're crossing in the right spots. Make sure you're starting and stopping in the right spots, and really that's the big bulk of what you need to do. Okay, cosine, same idea. So midline, amplitude, period. Okay, same stuff. Now we do have something that's a little funky here because we have that 1/2. So we're going to KFC this. We're going to keep the top, flip the bottom, and change it to multiplication. Okay, all we're doing is dividing fractions, so keep KFC it, keep flip change. So we're going to have 4 pi over 1 or just 4 pi. Okay, so midline's at 3. So 1, 2, 3. Amplitude goes up by 5, down by 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops, sorry, that should be blue. Apologize for that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this one's going to be super stretched out, and that's fine. So 1, 2, 3. Make sure you include 0. 4, 5. Okay, and then I'm ending at 4 pi. Halfway, halfway, halfway. Okay, again, for regulars, this would be good enough. For honors, I would want pi, 2 pi, 3 pi. Okay, so cosine. Let's go back to that original starter there. So remember, cosine started at the top and ended at the top. Okay, but just a second ago, we said if it was negative, it flips over. So normally cosine would start and end at the top, but these ones are actually going to start and end at the bottom because of that negative. Okay, so we're going to start and end there, which means my middle point is going to be way up here, and we're going to cross at these middles. Okay, so what I like to do is just kind of do like a loop there, go up, cross, go down, okay, and then do like a loop. Because again, these don't really stop here, they keep going, okay, but there's cosine of that equation. Okay, and again, that's really it. That's all you really have to do for these. There's nothing super crazy on these. On your sheet, on your worksheet today, you are going to have, this has been freaking some people out. So on the first page, okay, all the periods are 2 pi. Okay, and the reason I did that is because I want you on the first page, you're going to have changes with the midline and the amplitude. That's it. Okay, and then amplitude can flip it. The second page is where you have everything. Okay, now one more thing I need you guys to do. So the program we use to create this worksheet wouldn't allow me to put in negatives. So on all the even problems, I need you to go in and I need you to put in a negative. So for example, on number 2, it says 1/2 sine of theta. I want you to put the negative in front of that 1/2. For number 4, it says y equals 4 sine of theta plus 1. I want you to put that negative in front of the 4. Okay, so just put negatives on all the evens. Okay, and then that's what I need you to do for that work. If you have any questions, make sure you're stopping in for RTI time. Again, this is probably one of the easier graphing units, and it really doesn't get any more complicated than that for the regulars. For honors, make sure you're watching out for the second video. There's one more thing we need to add for you guys. Okay, again, please stop in if you need help, and I will see you guys next time.